14,200 years ago, on a slope above the Rhine in what is now Western Germany, 3 bodies went into the same grave. A man of about 40, a woman in her 20s, and a puppy roughly 7 months old. The grave was dusted with red ochre and covered with heavy basalt blocks so that nothing would disturb it. The puppy is the part that changes everything. Its teeth carry the damage left by canine distemper, a disease that still kills young dogs today. It caught the infection at around 4 months old and went through 2 or possibly 3 separate bouts of serious illness, each lasting weeks. An animal that's sick does not survive 3 weeks on its own. This one survived roughly 8. That means somebody kept it warm, kept it clean through the vomiting and the diarrhea, and got water and food into it day after day for 2 months. During all of that time, the puppy was useless. It could not hunt, could not guard, could not pull anything, could not do a single thing to earn its keep. Somebody nursed it anyway, and when it died a few weeks later, they buried it with 2 of their own. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our future documentaries. Thank you for your support. Now let's continue. That is the oldest known dog burial in the world, and it is not the beginning of the story. It is somewhere near the end. By that point, the relationship was already ancient. The beginning was far less sentimental. Picture a camp, not a village, just a hearth, some windbreaks, hides pegged out, drying racks, and people. Now picture what a camp produces. Bones with meat still on them, scraps thrown into the dark, guts, hides, spilled marrow, and at the edge of every camp anyone has ever lived in, a latrine. To a wolf, that is a food source that never moves and never runs. It is the easiest calories on the entire landscape, and the only obstacle is proximity to human beings. So the sorting began, and people had nothing to do with it. Every wolf has a flight distance, the range at which it breaks and runs. In any population, that distance varies. Most wolves will not come within a couple hundred yards of a fire. A few will come to 60. A very small number will sit at the edge of the firelight and wait. Those last ones ate. Through hard winters, when the hunting failed, the bold ones ate better than the shy ones, and they raised more pups, and those pups inherited the tolerance. Nobody adopted anything. Nobody trained anything. A population of wolves simply selected itself for the willingness to be near people over generations because being near people paid. And then the bodies started to change, in a way that shows up over and over in tame animals. Snouts got shorter and jaws got smaller, which crowded the teeth. Brain cases got smaller, coats went patchy, with white on the chest and the feet. Ears got softer, tails curled, skeletons got lighter overall. None of this was selected for. It rides along with tameness, because the same tissue in the early embryo that governs fear responses also builds cartilage, pigment, and parts of the skull. Breed for a calm animal, and you get a floppy-eared, blotchy, short-faced one whether you wanted it or not. That is why the oldest dog bones are recognizable. A skull with a shortened snout and crowded teeth was not living wild. There is a second route, and it almost certainly ran alongside the first. People take animals. Hunter-gatherers all over the world, right into modern times, have raided dens and brought young animals back to camp to be raised by hand, and women have nursed animal young at the breast to keep them alive. Wolf pups taken at a few weeks old imprint on whoever feeds them. Most of those animals never become anything. They grow up, become unmanageable at sexual maturity, and are driven off or killed. But if the pup came from a bloodline that already hung around camps, and if it stayed calm enough to breed in captivity, the 2 routes converge. The camp wolves supplied the temperament, the hand-raised pups supplied the bond. When exactly this happened is the messiest question in the field. There are skulls from Europe and Siberia between 30,000 and 36,000 years old that look, to some eyes, like dogs, and to other eyes, like a variety of wolf that no longer exists. The argument over them has run for decades and is not settled. What is clearer is the genetics, which put the split between dogs and living wolves somewhere in the range of 20,000 to 40,000 years ago, and which point to an ancestor population of wolves that has since died out entirely. The wolves alive today are not our dogs' ancestors. They are their cousins. What is not in doubt is that by the end of the Ice Age, dogs were living in human camps across Eurasia. So what did they actually do? The first job was almost certainly the alarm. A dog hears and smells things a person cannot, hours before a person could. A camp with dogs in it gets warning of a bear. a lion, a hyena, or another group of people approaching in the dark. For a species that had spent 2 million years being hunted at night, that alone was worth feeding an animal for. The second was hunting. A dog does not need to bring the animal down. It needs to find it, follow a blood trail after a wounded animal has run, and then hold that animal in place, circling and barking until the people catch up. That transforms the success rate of a hunt with spears, because the hardest part of hunting large game is not the throw. It is finding the animal again afterward. The third was hauling. Once dogs were part of camp life, they carried loads on their backs and later pulled them. 9,000 years ago, on an island in the Siberian Arctic, people were keeping dogs of a consistent size and build alongside the remains of sleds and harness gear. Those animals were not just tolerated. They were bred deliberately for a specific body suited to a specific job, which means somebody was choosing which dogs bred with which. That changes how far a group can move. A family carrying everything it owns on its own backs is limited by what a person can lift. Add animals that haul and the same family can move heavier gear, more meat, more hides, and small children across longer distances. In the far north, that is the difference between reaching a place and not reaching it. The fourth was warmth, and it is not a joke. In cold country, dogs sleep against people, and a dog gives off a great deal of heat. Whole traditions of measuring how cold a night was by how many dogs you needed to sleep against survived into modern times. The fifth was sanitation. Dogs clean a camp of scraps and waste, which reduces the flies and the rats and the smell. Put all of that together and the camp itself looks different. Dogs lying at the edge of the firelight, heads up, tracking every sound coming out of the dark. Dogs underfoot at the butchering, waiting for what gets thrown. Pups in among the children, being handled and carried and dragged around, which is exactly how a young animal learns that human hands are not a threat. Dogs on the trail behind a hunting party, running ahead and circling back, and a change in the sound of the night. A camp with dogs is never fully quiet, and that noise is the point. Anything approaching announces itself long before it arrives, which means people slept differently than their ancestors had for 2 million years. And the sixth was the one that shows up in the graves. Dogs got buried. Not thrown out, not eaten, not left. Laid in the ground, sometimes curled on their sides, sometimes with grave goods, sometimes alongside people. There are Ice Age sites in Central Europe where large canids were placed with care, in one case with a bone set in the animal's mouth after death. 10,000 years ago, in what is now Illinois, dogs were dug individual graves in the earth, the oldest known in the Americas, and dogs had crossed into that continent alongside the people who walked in from Siberia. None of which means it was gentle. Dog bones from prehistoric camps also turn up with cut marks on them, skinned and butchered like any other animal. In hard winters, the animal sleeping against you is also several days of meat and a warm pelt, and people made that decision. The relationship held affection and utility at the same time, the way it did with every animal people have ever kept, and the same camp could bury one dog with honours and eat another. The chemistry backs it up. Bones of early dogs carry the signature of what humans in the same camp were eating. They were not scavenging leftovers at the fringe anymore. They were being fed. Something else was being selected the whole time, and it left no mark on any bone. A dog watches a human face, point at something, and a dog follows the finger, which almost no other animal does, including wolves raised by hand from birth and including our closest ape relatives. A dog checks a person's eyes when it is confused, tracks where they are looking, and reads tone of voice. That is not training. It is built in, and it can only have been built by tens of thousands of years, in which the animals that paid attention to human faces got fed, and the ones that did not were driven off. Whatever else people were selecting for, they were selecting for an animal that watches them. It is worth being clear about how strange this is. Human beings have domesticated a long list of animals, and almost all of them are prey. Sheep, goats, cattle, pigs, horses, chickens, animals that eat plants, that live in herds, that follow and that can be penned. The wolf is none of those things. It is a large, fast, socially complex predator with a bite that breaks bone, and it competes with people directly for the same meat. It is the single most dangerous kind of animal to invite into a camp full of sleeping children. For most of the Ice Age, wolves and people were rivals in the plainest sense. They hunted the same reindeer and horses across the same frozen plains, tracked the same herds, and stole from each other's kills. A wolf pack finding a human kill would take it. A group of people finding a wolf kill would do the same. That competition ran for tens of thousands of years before anything changed, and it happened first. Before farming, before pottery, before permanent villages, before any other animal was brought in, people and wolves had already worked something out. The dog is the only domestic animal that predates agriculture entirely. What made it possible is that wolves and human hunter-gatherers were built along the same lines. Both live in small cooperative groups. Both hunt together and share the results. Both raise young that stay dependent for a long time. Both read status, mood and intention off other members of the group constantly. Two species that already understood how to live in a cooperative band did not have to invent much to live in the same one. Which brings the story back to the grave above the Rhine, and to two people who sat up with a dying puppy for 8 weeks, cleaning it and keeping it warm, and then chose to spend eternity with it. By the time anyone painted a wall, that arrangement was already tens of thousands of years old.